years, you've been a true friend of the dam, and all of us up there appreciate that.
Well, I honestly feel that's probably, without a doubt, it is the biggest, the nicest asset we have in this town, by far. And I think as we see the demand for water, especially clean water, well, that's what we have, pure water. There's no chance for pollution, and there's not very many places in the state of Virginia that has that opportunity. I certainly think it's an asset we have to protect and make sure we maintain. I thank Bobby for his services up there. I really do, because they've done a great job over the years.
You say for the dam to actually fail, it had to be 10 feet over the spillway.
Well, no, that was the estimate of what the design flood was before the state came in and did their revised precipitation estimate.
So what is it?
So 3.5 feet. And that's still not answering your question correctly. We're raising it 3.5 feet to prevent the overtopping of the abutments. And it's not that that's the trigger at which it would fail.
In 85, Bobby, let me ask you this. One of the worst floods we've had in this area, how many feet above the spillway was it?
At that time, approximately 3 feet.
3 feet.
But I wasn't there in '69. That was the big one.
That's my next question.
And I need to point out that when these events occur, I'm kind of preoccupied dealing with a lot of other things. We do monitor the dam, but it's difficult to keep an eye on it for surges and that type of thing. So I can't give you a precise answer to that, but right at the 3-foot level in 85.
Yeah, I did some research, especially in '69. You know, I live about a 1/4 of a mile from the dam. So if anything happens to it, I'll probably see you down in here somewhere. But and in '69 was one of the worst floods we've had. And that was Hurricane Camille. It dumped 6.61 inches in our area. And it was over 20 inches, that's 1,000-year storm. It broke 20 inches of rain. 85, it's 6.6, I'm sorry. And in '69, this dam held. What would make it break down? I hope we never see a storm like that again in '69.
I've gone back and checked, and I don't know the number off the top of my head. I was thinking that the '69 storm was something on the order of 4 to 6 feet, but I don't remember if that's right. I can follow up with you what I had calculated that to be. We always want to know when we're doing the analyses, when we're doing stability analyses in particular, that performance history is a wonderful thing to have, because it's a sanity check on what analyses, what computations we're doing. I don't want to be doing analyses that say your dam's going to fail when we know it has survived events that are of that kind of magnitude. Conditions do change. And actually, at this dam, because you had those gates on initially, that was the more demanding hydraulic loading on the structure, because the gates failed to open, and all we really have is anecdotal information from folks here in the community of what the pool level rose to. But that was your actual highest pool level. It was not that high of a flood. 69, Camille was your flood of record. It was the highest flow that passed through the spillway.
What formula, like I say, I've been up there below this dam for 50 years. What formula did you use that, all of a sudden this dam's become tumbling down when this crack? I don't like to call it a crack. I guess it is, but it's been there for 40, 50 years.
Right.
Why now is all of a sudden going to malfunction?
Well, one of the things that happens with some of these older dams, even older ones in particular than Clifton's, is that the design methodology has changed. It used to be back in the 20s when dams were being designed, they didn't even look at what we call uplift. Basically, it's that buoyancy effect. You've got the pool of water on the upstream side is pushing on the dam and trying to push it downstream or topple it over. You may have some forces resisting that. And 100 years ago, they didn't even look at what the uplift was underneath. And the dam industry evolved as more experience was gained with different dams. And one of the things that you see with the hydraulic modeling and the precipitation estimates is that that methodology evolves with time too. And that's what you see here just in the last couple of years with this statewide precipitation study that DCR undertook. The methodology that's existed up till that point has been in play for a couple of decades. And when this dam was built, it was a bit different than what has been in play the last few decades. So that precipitation estimate and the methodology for trying to route the storm down through the flood flows, down through the watershed to the reservoir, those things have changed over time. So what was considered back when the dam was designed and built to be acceptable is not necessarily what's been embraced today in the dam safety industry. And that's true too with the factors of safety that we're required to meet. That has gone through changes as well. You know, even if you had the same methods for estimating, the same formula, and this is all roundabout, I'm not really answering your question. There's not really a single one formula that's used. But even if you use the same methodology, what has been considered to be an acceptable, essentially, we'll call it a factor of safety, has not always stayed the same. So it's, you know, to some degree, it's just evolution of the industry playing out. But basically, you have a dam that's regulated by the state. They publish guidelines and requirements of what standards we have to follow. There's typically criteria offered both for sliding, factor of safety against sliding, and it's not exactly a factor of safety, but it's an expression of how the dam's tendency is to overturn that we have to meet. And if we can't show calculations that prove those numbers have been met, it's considered by us as the analyst and anyone who's going to review our work that this is not meeting the minimum standards.
So what you're saying is, no matter what condition this dam is in, it's being scrutinized differently now. So as Bobby Irvine said, the mandate is there.
Yeah.
Because the standards are different, they have evolved, and no matter what condition the dam is in, it's being evaluated in a different way.
Yes. In short, yes.
Okay, that's good.
And sometimes it's to your benefit, like this change for the precipitation value in the last couple of years was a big gain for this project.
Would you say that the structural integrity of the dam since 1969 would be the same as it was in 69, or degraded since then, or improved since then?
I have concerns over that leaking joint. I think that, although it has been leaking by all accounts for decades, that's a condition within the structure that I think is probably degrading. Whether that degrades to a degree that, you know, that particular monolith then breaks, that gets hard to pin down. There's a lot of complex behavior there that how the different monoliths within the dam interlock and can affect each other.
One thing that I would add to this discussion is, 50 years have passed since 1969. 50 years have been added to that dam. It's a 70-year-old dam. It will not last forever. We're not talking about the pyramids here. But also, when you look at infrastructure, and this is one of my specialty areas of asset management that I work with, you weigh the risk of failure and the consequence of failure, and you determine what you need to do, what's important, what are your priorities. In this case, you have a risk that's been fairly laid out and presented, and you have some dire consequences if that dam fails. You also have, on top of that, the regulatory requirement. So, in other words, you don't really have much of an option in this case. That dam could last another 100 years, just like it is, but it could fail at any time.
Last meeting we had on this, well, I got these emails back in April 27th, 2016. This email from you, I asked Darlene, is there any danger of the dam breaking? On April 27th, you wrote back, absolute, positively, potential loss of life and limb and property downstream. At our council meeting at May 10th, 2016, Mr. Roberts, which was on council then, asked you is any potential. And you said there is no immediate danger downstream. So, I mean, which way is it?
Well, there is a risk, Mr. Irvine. There's definitely a risk of failure of this dam. This has been shown by all of the studies that have been done. It has been agreed upon by the state dam engineer and so forth. Immediate danger, I'm not God, and I can't tell you what immediate means. There's no high water right now, there's no pressure on the dam right now. No, there probably isn't immediate danger. But one of the reasons that the town has looked so closely at this project is that eventually it will have to be done. I worked for a surveyor early part of my career. He was a pretty pricey surveyor. He charged a lot of money. And one time he was talking to a client, and the client said, "This is too much money. I'm just going to wait and get it done later." And he said, "It's not going to get any cheaper, sir. The cost of this dam will not get any cheaper." It would have been cheaper maybe 20 years ago if something had been done to it to improve it at that time.
Not really.
If the need were there. I'm sorry?
Not really. That was not the quoted figures that I listened to.
Well, perhaps we would have looked at it differently. We would have had a different PMP study at that time. So
I have to agree that with you folks, it's something that we are not talking about worrying with it. It's not in my lifetime that I worry too much about it. Like we're planning on a dam that's going to be lasting here for another 50 to 100 years, and it's probably very much of a necessity to have the dam upgraded and properly maintained. You're right, it's not going to get any cheaper. The cost of everything continues to escalate, so we're going to have that from now on.
In your presentation, you kept going back to the dam and our water supply. Bobby, I got a question. Where do we pull water from right now?
Currently, we're pulling from small reservoirs.
Smaller. How many times in the last year have we pulled from the big reservoir, the one that needs big?
Again, the large reservoirs primarily for redundancy, just the same as a small reservoir. When the large reservoir is used, the better water, the higher oxygen content, the cooler temperature is in the mouth of the stream, which is a small dam. So when we're able to do it, we pull from the small dam, unless, of course, storms or something like that intervene, and we're forced to switch back and forth from one to the other. But to answer your question, we're pulling from the small reservoir. So where would we be if the small reservoir was compromised? What do you do then? How long would it take to go in, clean it out, and get it back online? I will tell you, in '85, it took 7 days. People at Clifton Forge were without water for 7 days. I think it would be pretty reckless on our part to risk it again. I hope that answers your question.
And one thing, Bobby's mentioning that dam was compromised due to higher flows, you're saying?
Pardon me?
It was due to higher flows when you had flood flows that forced you toward taking water from the lower? And typically in the water supply industry, the way that would be approached would be to do a safe yield analysis, is what it's called, where you look at as many decades of data as we can muster up, and you're really looking at drought conditions commonly. And the reason you build a reservoir is to make sure that you've got an adequate supply on hand. So when you have drought conditions and you need to be drawing from a body of water that you're gradually depleting, you want to be able to maintain your community water supply to get you through that drought. And I don't know, that has not been done here, but if you had no lower dam and you only had the upper dam, there's very little storage up there.
So, Bobby, what would be the, just worst case scenario, emergency that happened to the small dam? Wouldn't the same emergency go down to the large dam? What I'm saying is, we can't pull from there. Why can we pull from the large? If it's
Because the intake of the small dam is in the mouth of the stream. It's subject to everything rolling down that creek. The larger reservoir, on the other hand, has the barrier of the small dam to kind of lessen that a little bit. Plus, it's a larger dam, the intakes are situated differently. It's never been compromised in my time there.
why don't we pull from the large dam mostly now? Why don't?
Again, the better tasting water, not the safer water, but the better tasting water, particularly this time of year, is out the mouth of the stream. It's just the physics of the water, the chemistry of the water. I don't know how to better explain it to you, but one problem kind of goes hand in hand with another problem. It wouldn't be so dire if we had sufficient storage in town to offset the loss of the dam, but we don't. And to go with the additional storage, it's going to cost you millions of dollars there. So it's kind of darn if you do and darn if you don't. If we lost both dams, we would probably be out of water within a day and a half. That's why you have to have redundancy. You have to have it.
How long have we been under this constraint order to fix the dam?
Well, I don't know if it's really a constraint order. I'm not sure if that's been issued. It's
The DEQ or whoever's in charge of it has been able to put forward, I know it's been since 2004.
We also had a presentation in 2011 about a lot of dredging, and I don't know if you remember that, Bobby. It was dire. It sounded like if we didn't do something right away, we were going to lose whatever we had. Do you remember that, Lori? I don't know if you did that one.
We did.
And we had no money. And so we put it off and put it off and put it off.
Yes.
So my question is, do we have a choice? And the first thing he said was potential loss of life. The second thing was for mandate. Do we have a choice? Then
Let's do it.
why don't we do it? I don't understand the discussions.
I don't think we have any other choice.
it's reasonable and fair to question the basis of the analyses. I don't, but when the analyses that can be endorsed by the regulators and concurred with by others in the dam safety industry show that you have a problem, there is a regulatory requirement. There is a mandate there. May not be in the form of a consent order, but
For as long as I've been on council, and that's 8 years, we've been questioning, is there a reason for this? What's going to happen if we don't do something? We have been questioning.
and ultimately what DCR's position, dam safety DCR's position will be, is you have to breach the dam. They're not going to give you an operation certificate for an unsafe dam. They'll let you limp along, essentially, with a conditional operation certificate as long as you're making forward progress. But
I might just add, we've been under a conditional permit for almost 2 years now. We'll have to request another one this fall. And I'm being required under this latest conditional permit to provide monthly reports to the regional DCR person who is responsible for oversight of this dam. They are serious about wanting this dam repaired to get it to an acceptable level where we would have a standard operating permit. So it's not going to go away from that standpoint, and we have to demonstrate progress. will tell you that they have been disappointed that we've not done this project before now, but they also have been understanding of the delays that have been caused as a result of the land issue with the U.S. Forest Service. But each month I have to report as to what progress we are making. And as I say, we will have to ask for another conditional permit for operation in the fall. It's our hope, because we're demonstrating progress, that that would be issued to us, and we do, as Mr. Howard has said, we do have the alteration permit, which means that the design that Gannett Fleming has provided is acceptable to DCR and will provide the necessary repairs or adjustments to make this dam in the future meet those standards.
Do you really, I don't know if you can answer this, but do you really think that they would stop production of this dam when you have production for the whole town of Clifton Forge, half Allegheny County, a hospital, nursing homes, schools, and homes for the elderly?
It is a huge dilemma. That's the problem. I mean, they're charged, we as dam safety professionals are charged with ensuring the safety and protecting the public. So when you have these infrastructure projects that pose risk, there's obviously a balance to be struck between that and the consequence of that thing failing versus what are the benefits that it's providing. It's providing your drinking water. So yeah, obviously you've got a serious problem. They can't just come in and order tomorrow, go breach the dam because you're not making fast enough progress in repairs. You'd be without a water supply for all of your customers. So they realize that's a problem. They also recognize that funding is a limitation for owners. And it's not unique to Clifton Forge, it's not unique to Virginia. And it puts the regulatory body in a tight spot because they're charged with protecting the public. But they know many owners can't afford to do what they're telling the owners they have to do. And that's why it's easy for me to flippantly say, well, they'll let you limp along, but that can only go so far. They've got to see, the problems being solved, because they're basically on the hot seat too. If the dam were to fail,
Ever dealt with a place similar to this, what we're dealing with?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not, you are not in it's a very common situation.
Well, I think there was one in Bedford that was basically the same thing. I believe they had to take the dam out because it wouldn't meet the criteria or whatever.
I don't think it was a concrete dam either, Carl.
I don't think it was concrete or not.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, it's our situation here, in my opinion, is what we need to do as far as this town is concerned, is we need to think about the future. And if we're thinking about the future, I'm in hopes, personally, that there will be some growth here for one thing. And if there is growth here, then by golly, we're going to use more water, and we need to have a system that is workable and that we can trust for the next 50 to 100 years, the way I feel about it.
I agree, Mayor Brinkley, and that brings back Mr. Urban's question. Without the large reservoir, I mean, even though you're drawing primarily from the small one now, if there is growth that comes about later, you need that capacity to serve future growth. So that's another thing to consider, and one of the reasons for preserving this dam and the larger reservoir.
I want to also remind the council and perhaps the community that in response to what Mr. Howard said about DCR understanding the plight of communities, the town has benefited from receiving 2 grants, actually 3 grants, if not 4, from DCR, and those are matching grants, so that part of the expense of these various studies that Mr. Howard mentioned, and even the design itself, has been partially funded by DCR in response to their understanding of this financial dilemma, so that we have been successful in at least reducing some of our direct costs as we've gotten to this stage in the project. Going forward, that's not going to be the case. That's why we're looking at rural development and those possibilities. But they have been acknowledging both our need for resources, but also the need to have these various studies done.
Yeah, and I think last year that grant from DCR was to Clifton Forge was by far the largest of the grants that they offered.
That's correct. And those last 2 grants totaled $130,000.
I'm also concerned about, the dam failing and our water supply. Another concern I have is our taxpaying citizens of low-income area. We have low-income citizens, mediocre citizens, medium range or whatever. And where's all this money? I mean, $4 million, if it comes in at $4 million, is a lot of money. And, we added $2 to the water bill, and we got 1,500 customers, that ain't but $36,000 a year. Now, my math rates will take 111 years to pay this note off. Or maybe half, because the county's gonna pay half, so another 50 years. So that's a lot of money for our citizens. I just don't see where we're coming up with that much money without raising water again in the near future by big time.
Well, as I still say we got to base our thought on the possibility of growth here. Everything, if we have no growth, it doesn't make any difference. We'll end up failing anyway. Without that. Now, we can't stay status quo. When we go through this, it's like this new budget, and we needed to come up with $61,000 just to cover operation costs. It has to come from somewhere. If you don't have the growth, then you have no other choice but to go back to the source of raising taxes or whatever we have to do. But if we get into a growth process here, I think it may be self-feeding, I'm certainly hopeful. So,
But here you go again, Carl, if.
And you gotta think too,
everything's a big if.
you gotta think too,
Life is an if.
what would the cost of catastrophic failure? I mean, you're gonna have a catastrophic failure, what was that cost?
I agree with you, I live a fourth of a mile from the dam. If it fails, I'm gonna have to learn to swim real quick.
You live in a mine.
Float fast or something.